Hello, ladies and gents. This is Mr. Windsor speaking. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Year 7 History with Mr. Windsor. Last lesson, we were speaking about the famous explorer Christopher Columbus, or in his native tongue, Cristoforo Colombo, because he was Italian. It must have been a very exciting time to live around the 1500s. The world is becoming a little bit smaller. New places being discovered, and there's this idea that you can find your wealth, find your fortune in these far-flung, far-off lands that are being discovered all the time. So there's a lot of feeling of possibility, however, with a rather sinister backdrop. What I'd like you to do before we start today's lesson, I'd like you to do a quick mind map on a spare sheet of paper. Columbus, discovery of the New World. I want you to try and remember as many things as you can as per the information of last lesson. You can do that now. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that we were talking about last lesson. So we were speaking about the discovery of the New World and Christopher Columbus. So let's have a look at Europe. So Christopher Columbus is from here. He is from Italy. He was quite an intrepid explorer in his youth, and he goes around various different wealthy countries such as France, Spain, England, Portugal, looking for a sponsor to give him money to launch an expedition to, he's attempting to go to Asia. Now, so far, the only route to Asia from the Mediterranean is to go through the Gap of Gibraltar, down the western coast, where slave trading, by the way, is already rife. By about 1420, people are taking slaves from West Africa. It's going to go round the Cape of Africa here, round down to South Africa, round this cape, ironically named Cape of Good Hope, although there are many shipwrecks around there which indicate that is not the case. And through either around Madagascar or through this gap between Madagascar and I think this is Mozambique. And eventually end up over perhaps here on the western fringe of India, or perhaps you want to sail a little bit further on to reach places like India, Vietnam, Southeast Asia. So Columbus's grand idea is he has done some of his calculations, and he reckons the world is actually a lot smaller than people make out. He reckons that if he were just to head straight west from Europe, he would eventually find his way through a new passage to Asia. If we look at this, it's actually a hell of a lot further going that way. Well, why does he want to go to Asia in the first place? It's a very, very good question. The trade goods in Asia at this time are very, very, very precious indeed. Things like spices from India, which are sought after back home to give your food a little bit more flavor. Wonderful fabrics such as silk, very specially made fabric using thousands of silkworms to create a very, very soft piece of fabric, which was sought after by all of the wealthiest members of society in Europe. And so there's a market for this exploration because if he can find new lands and find new goods, it means that his sponsors can make a hell of a lot of money off it. So he goes across the west. Hopefully he thinks he can find a passage through to Asia. People wrongly say that Columbus discovered North America. Well, he landed actually in the Bahamas, which would be around here somewhere. And yes, Bahamas and Nassau, this area here. So this is where he lands, and he is quite taken aback by the appearance of the native peoples. So here's Columbus on his ship. You can see a bit of a scene of chaos going on here. We've got these three gentlemen in the background looking dramatically in that direction. Someone holding onto Columbus's cloak there. Someone rending his shirt and going, "Oh my God," looking up to the heavens. Who will save us? And a guy here looking ready for battle, grasping the hilt of his sword while wearing a helmet. It seems likely this scene shows us where they first think they have discovered land. It's tempting to think that these gentlemen in the background here are looking out in this direction, perhaps towards some land which later turns out to be the Bahamas. So Christopher Columbus was Italian by birth, called Cristoforo Colombo. He was interested in finding wealth. By 1420, Portuguese boats sailed up and down the African coast, acquiring exotic spices. Okay, so if these things you didn't know before, you can be adding them to your mind map that you created and you'll do it now. So acquiring exotic spices, golden slaves to take back to Europe or take them with them on their voyage to sell in Asia. During the 15th and 16th centuries, wealthy monarchs sponsored explorers to go on expeditions to find materials that could be brought back to their country and sold. This would often be at the cost of the people who lived where the resources were, often receiving nothing in exchange for their resources and treated poorly or exterminated by white settlers. This certainly will become a case later on with the Native Americans. Other European countries, particularly Spain, wanted to share in the limitless riches of the Far East, after successfully throwing minorities such as Jewish people and Muslims from their kingdoms. The reason why that is relevant is if they're intolerant of people like Jewish people and Muslims, how intolerant are they going to be of people who look a lot more different from them in these far-off lands? Cristoforo Colombo was certain he would be able to reach Asia by going west and finding a passage that way rather than going around the coast of Africa. After a few unsuccessful attempts to convince wealthy politicians of his plan, he was finally able to convince King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella of Castile to support his plan. So King Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella are the parents of Catherine of Aragon, who will later be one of Henry VIII's wives. So upon landing in the Bahamas, this is an extract from Christopher Columbus's diary itself, although it's been translated because he would have written in Italian. You can see from the outset that he is quite interested in exploiting the natural resources as much as he can. It seems exceedingly likely he would have looked down on the native people for, first of all, not being Christian, and secondly, for being different from him, which is very much a viewpoint that white European settlers had. The inhabitants don't have any form of iron. Oh, brilliant, they can't defend themselves, which they are unadapted for anyway. They are well made and full of terror. Once they see that they're safe, they're very honest and pure. They'll be easier to rob. They give you everything you ask for and offer you things you don't ask for either. Brilliant. They show a lot of affection to all of us, exchanging valuable things for things of no value. I gave them many beautiful and pleasing things which I had brought with me in order to win their affection, to butter them up, and that they might become Christians and inclined to love our king and queen and princes and all the people of Spain, and that they might be eager to search for and gather and give to us what they have and what we greatly need. So Christopher Columbus here is saying that the people are very kind. They're giving him all the stuff that he needs, which is brilliant because he's hoping to take that home and sell it off for a tidy profit. So far, we can see that white Europeans in particular are interested in getting resources from the lands that they discover to make some money. Okay, so let's go on to today's lesson. So it's very, very similar. So we're still talking about the New World, except we're going to move westwards into America now, specifically to Mexico, which is the ancestral place of the Aztecs, and further south from Mexico, speak about the Maya, or in other words, the Mayans. Okay, so this is where Christopher Columbus would have landed in 1492. Round about this time, the Aztec population who would have lived in this vast stretch of land here will have already have reached their peak in about the 1200s, 1300s. If we go further south, then this area here, this is called the Yucatan Peninsula, Belize, Guatemala, southeast Mexico, and down into Honduras and El Salvador would be the territory of the Maya. Okay, so these are the two groups of people that we are going to be studying in today's lesson. So how are we going to study them? Well, we're going to use some information packs put together. We'll have a look at some of their art and architecture, and we're going to see if we can figure out the differences, the key differences and similarities between the Aztec and the Maya. Hopefully also this will help us gain some sort of cultural understanding of native peoples outside of Europe. Just give us a bit of understanding that because someone is from a different place, a different skin tone, and perhaps does not have technology as advanced as other places in the world, that to use the word primitive or barbaric or savage is the wrong sort of language to be using. Okay, so Aztecs and Maya. It'd be foolish to assume that people who lived in the New World were in some way barbaric, uncivilized, or inferior to white Europeans. Both Aztecs and Maya were highly complex societies with their own network of customs, traditions, beliefs, and ways of life. Not only this, but each society had their own special and unique methods of art and architecture. Some of these feats of building are superior, in fact, to things going on in Europe at the same time. The Aztecs were a monarchy. They're ruled over by one person. So if you're looking on the right, you're probably thinking, hey, this is roughly familiar. This looks a little bit like the feudal system going on in Britain in the Middle Ages, 1300s. You'd be absolutely right. A lot of societies use this hierarchy to sort of balance their society. The emperor, the man on the top, had to be chosen by Aztec nobles, higher up members in that society. The emperor had to be over 30 and needed to have gone to a special Aztec school. He will have needed to have proved himself as a capable and ferocious warrior. It's no good having a leader in mid-America if that leader is not able to fight and win various different territory disputes and fights for land. The Aztec built many of their most important buildings very tall to mimic mountains, since mountains are very imposing and dominant. We have this trait as well. We, especially in the 1600s and since, we build churches and cathedrals very, very large. The reason for that is because the building is meant to be imposing. It's meant to make a statement, i.e. with Christian churches, this is where God is, therefore very, very important, therefore the building must be large. Very similar for the Aztec and the Maya. The Aztec also believed that mountains protected them from the rain, so to make buildings in the same way would benefit them. This style of building also puts into perspective the importance of religion in Aztec culture. If it's very, very tall and very, very ornately built, then that places importance on whatever the building is used for. So the Maya. The civilization reached its intellectual and artistic heights, which no other in the New World and few in Europe could match at the time. The Maya's territory stretched from southeast Mexico to Belize and some areas in Central America, so Salvador and Honduras. They are famous for their complex systems such as mathematics, art, and architecture. They were the first civilization in the pre-Columbian era to develop a writing system. And on the right-hand side here is some of the glyphs that they will have used to write. On the top right here, we see a ball court. The Maya were known for playing a particular ball game, and they used to have specially made courts for it, and you can see the steps here, which meant that people would have been able to watch. It's something you can see in the Disney film Road to El Dorado. The Maya were a more seafaring people than the Aztecs, with extensive trade routes by sea. Because a lot more of their territory was on the coast, it seemed natural to them to get into some boats and start trading with people across the water. The Maya had a large emphasis on astrology, the stars, and the sky. A commonly held myth is that a Mayan calendar predicted the end of the world in 2012. The reality seems much more that they hadn't bothered making the calendar past the year 2012 simply because they couldn't conceive of that length of time before. So just because the calendar stops at 2012, that doesn't mean that the world will end in 2012. The Maya are known to have made paper from tree bark, and they wrote in books made of this tree bark. The earliest reports of the use of rubber and chocolate come from the Maya, and indeed the Aztecs as well. So another key thing about most empires and civilizations around Middle America at this time, the Aztecs and the Maya, many of them did practice human sacrifice. The reason for that usually was that they believed that their god, for the Aztecs, their main god, the sun god called Huitzilopochtli, wow, that's difficult to say, grew his strength by drinking the blood of those that had been sacrificed. And many people around this area had the same idea as well. So many of them did use human sacrifice. Which leads me on to my next point. So a few comments on classical civilizations. A lot of our reports of classical civilizations, such as the Mayans and the Aztecs, come from white European historians. And so we've got to be careful of the reports that we receive from them. They have an agenda in making these people seem barbaric, savage, uncivilized, and all these other negative things. Many of these historians had an interest in showing themselves to be superior to other races of different cultures and skin tones. This sort of reasoning allowed white Europeans to seize resources and land and kill native peoples guilt-free due to their superiority and the idea that God was on their side, and the idea that anyone who was not Christian either needed to be converted or to be killed. And so we've got to be careful of the way native peoples are shown in history, because it gave many people at the time a reason to consider them uncivilized and therefore not think twice about exterminating them in the thousands. Okay, let's have a bit more information. So this information now isn't my research. This is what you will find in your booklets, ladies and gents. So Aztecs, located in central Mexico, it ruled much of the region from the 1400s until the Spanish arrived in 1519. By the time the Spanish had arrived, the civilization of the Aztecs had already passed its peak. Much of the Aztec society centered on their religion and gods. They built large pyramids as temples to their gods and went towards capture people they could sacrifice to their gods. Often they also sacrificed Aztec inhabitants. There are some conspiracy theories that these step pyramids were created by these civilizations, but with the help of alien species as well. It's a very tempting conspiracy theory to think about, but if you think about it logically as well, if you want to get to a high up place, then steps usually are the most rational way to go. And so therefore, if you put steps on top of steps on top of steps, you're going to end up with a step pyramid, perfectly reasonable and doesn't require any alien intervention. The capital city of the Aztec Empire was Tenochtitlan. At the height of its power, this city likely had a population of 200,000 people. The city was divided up into districts, and they would call their ruler the Tlatoani instead of king. The Aztecs used aqueducts, which was a system to bring fresh water into the city. So not many civilizations had this even at this point, so they were hugely advanced in being able to draw water into their city and have running water to use. One of the most important aspects of Aztec religion was the sun. The Aztecs called themselves the people of the sun, and they felt in order for the sun to rise each day, the Aztecs needed to perform rituals and sacrifices to give the sun strength. There were also priests, so because it's so important to keep the sun god happy, therefore the people who keep the sun god happy, the priests, are also very important. The priests were responsible for making sure that the gods were offered the correct offerings and sacrifices. They had to perform all sorts of ceremonies in the temple to make sure that the gods were not angry with the Aztecs. The Aztecs believed that the sun needed the blood of human sacrifice in order to rise each day. They performed thousands of human sacrifices. Some think more than 20,000 people were killed in the Great Temple. So a few aspects of Aztec daily life. The elderly members of the family were well taken care of and respected. Slaves are generally treated well and can buy their way out of slavery. A punishment for breaking a law was often death. There was one caveat to this law, though. If you went to a priest and confessed the crime that you had done before it's found out, you were often forgiven and given one more chance. But if you ruined that chance, you'd be put to death. The word chocolate comes from the Aztec word chocolatl. The sons of nobles went to separate school where they learned advanced subjects such as law, writing, and engineering. So there's a very keen separation between nobles, the people above, and peasants and normal folk, the people below, like most societies at this time. So the Maya civilization began as early as 2000 BC, and the Spanish arrived in 1519 AD. Again, by the time the Spanish arrived, the Maya were already at their civilization peak. The Maya were located in Central America, in a region that's today made up of southern Mexico. They built hundreds of cities filled with large stone structures. The Maya were the only American civilization at this point to develop an advanced written language. They excelled at maths, art, architecture, and astronomy. The Maya are different with the Aztecs because the Aztec kingdom was centered around their capital city, whereas the Maya didn't have a capital city, and so their kingdom was kind of a loose network of various different cities, all loosely calling themselves Mayans. Mayan religion. The Maya believed in a large number of nature gods. They lived in the jungle, and so all of these gods looked after various different things to do with the forest. Some gods were considered more important and powerful than others. The most important Maya god was Itzamna, who was the god of fire and who created the earth. He was ruler of heaven as well as day and night. It is thought that this name means lizard house, although how that bears any relevance to his role in Mayan society, no one knows. Priests, again, a high importance on priests. They're responsible for performing rituals to keep the people in the favor of the gods. They were very powerful people. Some of the priests' duties included to impersonate the gods, to predict the future, to work miracles, to prevent famine, droughts, so not enough water, not enough food, plagues and earthquakes by performing a ritual, and to ensure rainfall by performing rituals. The Maya are perhaps best known today for their many pyramids. They built pyramids to their gods that towered hundreds of feet tall above the jungle. At the top of the pyramid was a flat area where a temple was built. The priests would then get to the top of the pyramid using staircases built into the sides. They would perform rituals and sacrifices at the temple on the top. A big part of Maya life included the stars and the Maya calendar. Some days were considered lucky days, while other days were considered unlucky. They set their religious ceremonies and festivals according to the position of the stars and the days on the calendar. So they believed that the world was created in 3114 BC, as this was the zero date in their calendar. So both the Maya and the Aztecs have pyramids of some description, step pyramids more specifically. So when you have two civilizations that are distinct but occupy roughly the same territory, so we have Aztec centered around this area here and the Maya occupying this territory here, there's going to be some what's called cultural bleeding between those two civilizations, which means that they are going to pick up various different customs and traditions and way of doing things from each other. And so you may see some very keen similarities between the two civilizations. Okay, so this task isn't necessarily in your booklet, but you can use a spare sheet of lined or plain paper in order to do this. So I've got some key terms placed in a circle on this sheet. So let's have these key terms written down in the same shape as I have it on the board. So we have on the top left, this can go in any order, but as long as it's loosely in a circle. So astrology, Aztecs, polytheism, Mayans, aqueducts, priests, hierarchy, chocolate, human sacrifice, Mexico, religion, Middle America. Don't necessarily have to be in that order, but let's have all of those keywords written down loosely in a circle, please. So I'm going to do a few things with these key terms. So I will just demonstrate for you using my visualizer in a moment. So I have my concept map in front of me here. I have all of these words in a circle, and all of these words have been mentioned in today's lesson. So it's a couple of different steps. Step 1, give a key term for each definition. Step 2, explain its relevance in the context of the Aztec and Mayan civilizations. Step 3, create a concept map, linking together key concepts. Explain how they are linked. Okay, so let's give you a couple of examples in order to be going on with. So polytheism. So this comes from a Greek word. Poly means many, an ancient Greek word rather, and theism, well, theos means God. So polytheism is the word for believing in many gods. Believing in many gods. So I've given that a definition. So now that I've learned a little bit about the Aztecs and the Mayans, I can draw a link between polytheism and the Mayans and polytheism and the Aztecs. I know that the Mayans worshipped nature gods, because the Mayans and their civilization was centered mainly around jungles and forests. Whereas I know the Aztecs also worshipped many gods, but in particular they were called the people of the sun. They had other gods apart from the sun god, but their principal god was the god of the sun. Okay, so we've got polytheism and Mayans and Aztecs. You might also want to give a definition to Mayans and Aztecs. We've got a civilization in Mexico, and we've got Mayans civilization in Central America or Middle America. Okay, so let's do one more, just so I'm certain that you guys know what you are doing. So let's go over here to astrology. So we heard before that one of these civilizations has more of an emphasis on astrology. Does anyone remember which one it was? So I imagine some of you talking out loud to your screen right now in a very sort of Dora the Explorer style way. It was, of course, the Mayans, because they paid more attention to astrology, so stars and the night sky. So I might want to draw a link using as neat a line as possible to astrology And the link there would be they were interested in stars and the night sky. So the idea of this task, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to give an idea of what each of these things mean. So astrology will be the study of stars. So give a definition to each of these keywords and talk about how they're relevant to the Aztec and the Mayans first. Then what I'd like you to do, as I have, is to draw a link between these keywords and explain why they are linked. So polytheism, believing in many gods, is linked to both the Aztecs and the Mayans because both civilizations believed in many gods. However, the Mayans worshipped nature gods, whereas the Aztecs, while worshipping other gods, principally worshipped the sun god. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That is a bit of a difficult task, a little bit left field, but I'd be really interested to see how you get on with that, and we'll go through it together in a moment as well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so let's have a crack at this together then. So let's have a look at some of these keywords and think about which civilization they link to and how they link to that civilization. I appreciate, actually, it's not very easy to see on my screen because there's light streaming in through the window. I have the blinds down, but it's still a bit sunny outside, so I apologize for that. Okay. So let's go over here. Let's go to Middle America. So which of the civilizations, Aztecs or Mayans, which lived in Middle America? That's right, it was the Mayans, ladies and gentlemen. They lived in Middle America. So along our arrow, we can write the link there. So we can say Southeast Mexico, other countries such as Belize, Honduras. These are real countries. These are all in Middle America. So the kind of between North and South America in essence. So religion. So we can say that both of these civilizations are linked to religion, ladies and gentlemen. We can also say that they are both linked to polytheism. So I'm going to draw my arrow like this. And I can say that both religions are, and I'm going to use this word up here, except I'm going to use it in adjective form now, are polytheistic, as in they worshipped many gods. So Mexico. So which of the civilizations lived in Mexico? That's right, it is the Aztecs, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so it is the Aztecs. We don't need any further explanation for that. So which of these civilizations, ladies and gentlemen, practiced human sacrifice? That's right, it was both the Mayans and the Aztecs, ladies and gents. Perhaps you'd like to, especially for the Aztecs, the idea that blood fed their main god. So they had to give their main god an offering of blood in order to continue the sun rising in the morning. So chocolate, which of these civilizations is linked mostly to chocolates? Well, mostly the Mayans, although the Aztecs as well are both linked to chocolate. It apparently comes from the Aztec word chocolatl, although I don't know how true that is. It is a lovely story. Okay, so hierarchy. So first of all, hierarchy is the levels of society. So in our society, that would probably be, since we don't really use a queen anymore, she is up there, but she doesn't really have much of a function anymore. At the top of our society would be someone like the Prime Minister. Beneath him would be his advisors, otherwise known as the cabinets. Beneath those people would probably be the MPs. And there are various different levels. There are the lords up there as well. And at the bottom would be the citizens, i.e. the normal schmoes, you and I. So hierarchy is the levels of society. So Mayans, both Mayans and Aztecs had quite a strict social hierarchy, ladies and gentlemen, which put their king, or in other words, emperor, at the top of the pile. So it went king, then it went priests, then it went nobles, and then it went peasants. So priests were religious men, and both Mayans and Aztecs had priests. However, only one society that we know of, or this could be true of the Mayans, but we haven't found any evidence of it yet, Aztecs had aqueducts, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just remind ourselves what an aqueduct is. It is a water pipeline to bring running water into the city. So not many civilizations had that. Okay, so you can pause the video at this point just to read my writing to help give you some of the answers. I appreciate that's been a bit of a mess, but what we've done by doing that task is that we found that many of these key features to do with each of these societies are similar, but there are some key ways in which these societies are different from one another as well. Right, so ladies and gents, so hopefully that was quite useful in being able to visualize the differences, key differences and similarities rather, between the Maya and the Aztecs. Okay, so let's move on with today's lesson. So let's begin our comparison then. Okay, so step one, draw two columns. Again, you may need a spare sheet of paper for this because this isn't necessarily, this is in your booklets as well. So it's up to you which way you do this. So draw two columns like this, Aztec and Maya. Step two, write down everything you remember off the top of your head about the Maya and Aztecs. Okay, so from memory at first, please, children. That'd be really, really good. Ladies and gents, from memory first. Then comes step three. Go back over your notes and add information that you missed out. If you're just going over your notes and adding that information straight in, that is not especially helpful as it is not sticking into your long-term memory. There's no effort to remember the information there, and so it might just get lost. If you make an effort to remember in step two and then go back and consolidate with your notes, you have a greater chance of remembering it in the future. Extension, add icons or logos to help you better remember the information. So for instance, if my key piece of information was both Maya and Aztecs had step pyramids, this would be my icon or logo I would put with it. Recent studies show that if I link pieces of my knowledge to a visual cue like I have here, I'm far more likely to remember that piece of information. And I do this in my personal notes all the time. So give yourselves, I don't know how long you're going to need for that. I'll leave it up to you. You can pause the video and have a crack at that task now. Awesome. So let's figure out those similarities and differences once and for all then. So we're going to do this bit by bit. Maya on the left, Aztec on the right. Okay, so polytheistic, worshipped many gods. That's our new word of today, polytheism. If you're polytheistic, you worship many gods. That is true of both, although I suppose you could say the Aztecs had more of an emphasis on their sun god, who required blood in order to make the sun rise each day, supposedly. Human sacrifice. Both societies practice human sacrifice after a bit of research that I've done myself, and not just these two guys, but also other Mesoamerican civilizations. So Mesoamerican means people that live in that middle part between North America and South America. A lot of people apparently did practice human sacrifice. Step pyramids. Both civilizations use step pyramids, ladies and gentlemen. Were they built with the help of aliens? Probably not, but both of them have them. This might be due to some sort of cultural bleeding effect. Because the Aztecs and the Maya were relatively close to each other, they might have copied that tradition from one another. So another key thing is that the Maya were not necessarily unified into one nation. This is a bit of a misnomer anyway. It's difficult to imagine the Aztec were all united in one territory under one kingdom, but they were certainly more unified than the Maya were, which were made up of kind of a loose union of city-states, occasionally getting along, but also occasionally fighting against other Maya people as well.